Hello, dear friends. Last time, I promised that we will talk with you about deferred karma. This is quite a voluminous question, because it includes so many different aspects. Let's break down at least some of them. Here, according to what new comments have appeared, and they're paid attention. But what about the government officials, corrupt officials? Here just, it is possible to refer to the concept of deferred karma. Sometimes it is not even deferred karma. But let's look at it this way. Those who ask this question didn't analyze any specific cases, any specific situations, and this is just some reasoning. In fact, it may be different in each case. We also often see in various programs that some officials are punished for bribery, for various corrupt schemes that they build. They are put in jail and they receive certain terms. After all, this is present in our lives, so there is retribution, there is truth. In other cases, after all, no one has analyzed what specifically happens in the families of such officials, whether their relatives are sick or not, or what specifically happens to them. Maybe one of the relatives gets into accident or some other situation, or maybe there is something wrong with the children. Therefore, it is difficult to judge only superficially. But if exactly to understand each specific case, the picture can be very impressive. Practically speaking, few people think about what will happen after some action is taken. However, even here we must keep in mind that humanity is not yet at a very high stage of its development. And last time we also talked about the fact that at every stage of development there is a driving force. And if a person acts in accordance with this driving force, then accordingly some things are forgiven. But as soon as his driving force begins to change, then the law of the boomerang starts to work. And there is, of course, no getting away from it. These are all things, of course, we must take into account. This is the answer to this question about deferred karma. Once again, as long as man corresponds to his driving force, respectively he is kind of alright in life. But some negative potential is accumulated, which also begins to work gradually and gradually worsens the various situations for a man. Let me remind you that the law of karma is a teaching law, and it turns out that a person is given a situation, and the person did something wrong, and then the situation becomes tougher for him, in order to direct him to the right understanding. If the person again didn't do what he should do, the situation becomes even more serious for him, and so the situation can be brought even to a grotesque state. When, as people say, even a baby understands what the right thing to do in such a situation is. I would also like to draw your attention to the things that I voice in our conversations are not just made up out of my head. Many things are confirmed by the constant practice of working with many people. I often have to lecture to different audiences. We have listeners with whom we have been connected for a long period of time, and they constantly find evidence in their lives of what we and you are talking about, including the law of karma. So, if a person wants to understand, he will understand. He will keep track of what is happening personally in his life, what is happening to his acquaintances, loved ones, and a number of other people. If a person really begins to sharpen his attention to what is happening around him, he will find a very large number of confirmations of everything that we are talking about. The one who doesn't want to notice anything around him will naturally work the internal spirit of contradiction. It cannot be because I don't know it, because I don't want to know it. I don't want to see it around me. This is how a person sort of absolves himself of responsibility. The truth that it is the easiest way to say that I don't know, so it cannot be. By the way, this very often also works when some scientists put forward a certain theory. The theory is absolutely fair, and other scientists say it cannot be, because it is not clear to me. This is a common phenomenon in our lives. Really, I like this particular quantum scientist, Fursa. Once his daughter became interested in esoterics and he decided for himself. Of course he can scold his daughter for what she goes somewhere, but she too is not a stupid person. But maybe there really is something useful, interesting, and instead of arguing with his daughter, he also decided to get acquainted with what she is interested. When he really started to get acquainted with these things, he found that quantum physics, constantly in its development, confirms that has been said in esoterics since ancient times. This is really the approach of a scientist who doesn't reject everything simply because he is unfamiliar with it, but he really seeks to understand something and find for himself either a refutation or confirmation of what he is already familiar with. That is the approach that seems to me more correct than rejecting everything that you don't like or don't want to acknowledge. Now about the deferred karma. Of course, there are a lot of different aspects, as I said, that I have to deal with the concept of deferred karma. Here is one example from my practice. I had to work with a woman with cancer who had already been discharged by the doctors. She was practically unable to walk on her own, and I must pay tribute to the organization in which she worked. The management of the organization specifically allocated a car to bring this woman to me. I worked with her, but the woman herself was very stubborn, and according to the law, in principle, she should have already left this life. She had breast cancer and already had metastasis to her spine and some other organs. You can imagine that it was a very difficult situation for a woman in general. You practically can't get out of such a condition. She was aware that she couldn't live this life at this point in time. And when I started to talk to her on the first day, She said I couldn't leave yet. I needed 2.5 years to get my son up on his feet. He was just about to graduate from school in 2.5 years and had to get into his own independent life.
Он как раз должен закончить через 2,5 года школу и должен уже влиться в свою уже самостоятельную жизнь.
And I have to admit, she was a very strong-willed person, and she really wanted to devote the rest of her life to helping her son get on his feet. Her illness were of course related to her relationships with her mother, and there were very serious disagreements with her mother. I will not fully explain what exactly this illness is, why exactly there should have been a passing from this life. I will only draw attention to the fact that she asked for a 2.5 years reprieve. A week later, thanks to her persistence, she was already taking public transportation to our meetings. After 2 weeks, she began to run in the woods. But the woods were close to the house where she lived. She worked hard on herself, persistently did all the exercises which I gave her, and it brought results. She really managed to get out of this serious illness quickly enough and lived a normal life. She really helped her son to finish school well. And here in regards specifically to delayed karma or deferred karma, as soon as 2.5 years had passed, immediately she had a very dramatic health collapse. Almost immediately lost consciousness and was unconscious. According to the law of karma, because of the wrong relationships between her and her mother. Her mother had to come and take care of this body. Here I draw attention to the fact that she herself asked for a delay of 2.5 years. This is not the only such case in my practice. There have been other similar cases. I will notice that when a person must leave this world, but he understands that he hasn't yet had time to do something, and precisely because he is still needed in this world, and because he doesn't want to prolong his existence in this world for his own sake, but for the sake of someone, then even in such serious cases it happens that a person is given a reprieve.
Бывает, что человеку дается отсрочка.
We can also pay more attention that, of course, it is very difficult for us to judge about what is going on, because our life moves very slowly. The development of consciousness goes slowly, so it is difficult to see some moments stretched in time. Naturally, it is difficult for an ordinary person to compare this chain of causes and effects, and to some extent, this makes it difficult to understand this law. There was also a question in the comments that people often don't remember what happened, much less anything from their past lives. And I'd say, thank God they don't. Imagine at this period of time, at this point in human development, when even more egoism is at work, the apparent inability to build relations, How many different examples we see when people start to fight, and this enmity goes on for years.
И эта вражда идет и идет годами и годами. И вот представьте, что
Imagine that if this were to continue, and the memory remained in a person, and with this same memory, at this stage of his development, a fairly low stage of his development, a person would remember what had happened in his past life. It would be like some people's vendetta, really vendetta, stretching life after life, and what good would come of it? Imagine some people say that they don't understand why there are such relations in the family. They fight like a cat with a dog. But if you analyze the past life, just there were reasons. Because people were at enmity with each other, and if they came to a new incarnation with this memory, they would continue this enmity. The memory is still absent at such stage of development, but it will develop with time. But this is another question. This is a question of further evolution of consciousness, when the continuity of consciousness is reached. There are such examples in yoga, when such states are reached, but we will talk about this later. In this particular case, when former enemies are shoved into the same family, that is where you can't go anywhere. Blood kinship. They are in the same family. They are very closely related to each other and have to settle relations between them. It is true that they quarrel, yes, badly. They are in contact with each other, but you can't avoid it. They are forced to adapt to each other, and so you see little by little, during one or maybe two lifetimes, and the relationships between these consciousnesses has already been established. Thus very wisely built all our life and development of mankind, and it allows mankind to gradually move to more and more positive relationships. So we must just admire how the Creator is so carefully thought out all the nuances in our world, that it allows men to make successive steps in their development. A very wise, coherent system. It is true, of course, that there are other moments that can be attributed to the concept of deferred karma. But also note that no one requires a first grader to solve integral problems. That is why at the moment a person is only required to do what he is capable of, and if he is already capable of more, he will be required to do more. I'll note that a person has to work off something in his karma, and in order this karmic work off does not prevent him from a new accumulation, a new experience in this life, accordingly given the opportunity to pay karmic debt, when the person has already left this world. And then it's like the completion of this incarnation, and at the same time the payoff of karmic debt. Of course, I can give many more examples, many more things to say about the deferred karma. But at least at the moment, this is the main thing that people could pay attention to. And I will also say, if something happens once, yes, it is by chance. If 2 times, it may be some kind of regularity. And if more than that, you can say it is already a habit of a person. So, of course, when it turns out that people are repeatedly confronted with something, it becomes quite clear that this is the case. In my practice, I've been working with people for a very long time on different occasions, both health, and life situations. I have to work on so many issues and constantly discover for myself a confirmation of what we're talking about and will continue to talk about. So again, I'm not just talking about something. A lot of things have to do with my practice of working with people. For me, it is quite clear. So I want to explain some of these things to you too, so that you will pay attention to them in your life.